She rounded the corner, still in the dress, barefoot, now holding the hem up slightly. Derek followed behind her, talking to one of the boutique staff, his tone light casual. Like this was normal. Like this was theirs. They didn't see me right away. Vivian was mid-spin, admiring herself in the side mirror when her eyes caught mine. She froze. Her smile faded in stages. Derek turned next. His voice stalled mid-sentence. I didn't speak. Not yet. I waited for them to close the distance. I'm Harper, and this is how I took back everything she tried to wear like it was hers. I was editing a mock-up for a wedding catalog when my phone lit up. I almost didn't check it. Just another notification from Instagram. But the preview caught my eye. A boomerang story from Marcy Hastings, one of those mutual friends you don't talk to but still follow out of politeness. The clip was short. Vivian, my sister, standing in front of a row of full-length mirrors in a bridal boutique downtown. Her head tilted. A laugh caught mid-motion. And next to her, adjusting her hair in the reflection, was Derek. My fiancé. My stomach didn't drop. Not yet. Not until I saw what she was wearing. The ivory gown with the clean neckline, the subtle embroidery under the bust, the waistline detail I had spent 3 calls with Maribel perfecting. My engagement dress. The one I had designed, customized, and confirmed for pickup next week. I blinked. Watched it again. Watched her turn, pose, smirk. Nothing in the caption. No tags on the dress. Just the boutique's location. The same place I had sent my final measurements to 2 days ago. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then stood. No texts. No calls. I grabbed my keys. The drive across Portland felt longer than it should have. Sunset was leaking through the trees, casting long shadows over the highway. I don't remember the playlist that was playing. I don't remember the traffic. I just remember gripping the wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale. I parked 2 blocks away. The boutique sat tucked between a florist and a juice bar, all pastel windows and soft lighting. I didn't go inside right away. I stood across the street watching people filter in and out. Brides. Friends. Someone holding a camera. Then I crossed. Inside, the boutique smelled like peonies and clean linen. A bell chimed as I stepped in. No one turned. I walked past a display of veils, turned left toward the checkout counter, and stopped. The cashier looked up. Blonde, maybe 25, cheerful but distracted. She offered a tight smile. Can I help you? I shook my head gently. Just browsing. She nodded and turned back to her computer. And I stood there. Not in a rush, not in anger. I just stood facing the entrance. One hand resting lightly on the counter, the other wrapped around the folded receipt I had printed out last night. The final invoice for the engagement dress. My name in bold. Harper Lane. Delivery scheduled for next Wednesday. The minutes stretched. Behind me, another customer giggled. A girl talked excitedly about tulle layers. A fitting assistant walked by holding a clipboard. But I didn't move. I didn't check my phone. I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I simply waited. 10 minutes. Maybe 12. Then I heard it. Vivian's laugh, a sound I used to love. It came before she did. Vivian blinked, adjusted the strap on her shoulder. Then tried to recover. Harper, hey, we were just. I raised my hand slightly. A small gesture. Not enough to stop her, just enough to quiet the noise. She paused. Derek scratched the back of his neck. Vivian glanced at the cashier, then at me again. The room felt quieter than it should have. I looked at the dress. At the seam on the left hip where we'd added a hidden zipper. A detail Maribel insisted would make it easier for me to get in and out without help. I looked at Vivian. Nice fit, I said. She laughed, but it was hollow. It was just lying there, she said. I thought it might be a sample. It's not a sample, I said evenly. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't give her room. I pulled the folded receipt from my hand and placed it on the counter. Slid it forward, without looking. That's the invoice, I said. Her eyes flicked down. My name's on it. Order confirmed. Pickup date next week. Vivian looked at Derek, then back at me. It's just a dress, she said. I looked at her for a long time. No, I said softly. It's not just a dress, and I meant it. But I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I turned and walked toward the door, the weight of their silence trailing behind me. I stepped back into the evening light, hands, steady heartbeat slow. I didn't need to stay to hear what they'd say after. I had seen enough. I kept walking until I reached the corner of the block. The evening air hit cooler than expected. I thought about heading home, but something pulled me back. Maybe it was the way Vivian's voice cracked at the end, or the way Derek looked anywhere but at me. I stood there for a moment, then turned around and walked back into the boutique. Inside, the lighting felt brighter than before, overly soft, like it was trying to blur the edges of what had just happened. I stayed near a row of sample gowns, fingers grazing fabric I didn't feel. A few moments passed. Then I heard them again. Vivian's voice filtered through the curtain near the main fitting room. Light, carefree, like nothing had happened. So for the second fitting I was thinking lace maybe along the back, she said to the attendant. Derek added something I couldn't hear, then they both laughed. I stepped forward just enough so they'd see me as they came out. I didn't hide, I didn't speak. Vivian pushed the curtain open, first holding the hem of the dress off the floor, her smile still half-formed when her eyes landed on me again. Derek followed, holding 2 paper cups of lemon water. His steps stalled immediately. Vivian blinked. "Oh, Harper," she said, "you're still here." I didn't answer. She motioned awkwardly to the dress. "It's beautiful, right? I didn't even realize it was yours at first." "Which size did they pull for you?" I asked. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. Vivian hesitated. "I think a 4. Why?" "Because I ordered a 4, I said, and I handed her the printout again. The one with my name, the specs, the pickup date, and the design approval attached. She glanced at it, then looked to Derek like he might jump in. He didn't. Vivian cleared her throat. Maybe the stylist mixed it up. They have a lot of orders. I nodded slowly. That's one way to explain it. She shifted her weight. The assistant behind her hovered, visibly unsure whether to keep holding the clipboard or run. I turned to Derek. You said the dress looked familiar when we picked the embroidery. You remember that? He opened his mouth then closed it. It's just a misunderstanding, he finally said. This whole thing is being blown up. It's a dress, Harper. I looked at him, and for a second I didn't see the man I agreed to marry. I saw someone who measured inconvenience more carefully than truth. You're saying this in the boutique where I ordered my engagement dress, I said. Vivian stepped in, defensive now. Okay, let's not make this a big thing. I'm sorry if it felt like I crossed a line. I just saw it there and assumed it was one of the samples. You assumed it was a sample with a custom neckline and a hidden zipper, I asked. The zipper I added because Maribel said it would help with back support. She went silent. Derek stepped toward me, hands raised in that half-pacifying gesture he used whenever he spilled something on the couch or forgot a birthday dinner. Let's just talk this out later. In private. No, I said. We're here now. The assistant excused herself. I didn't blame her. Vivian started to unzip the dress in place, muttering about returning it before anyone else noticed. I stepped back, giving her space, not out of politeness but out of sheer need to breathe. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of silence before. It wasn't the kind that begged for sound. It was the kind that settled, slow and weighty, pressing on everything left unsaid. Derek placed the water cups on a nearby table. I could tell he wanted to explain something, anything, but there was no version of this that would sound like an accident. Vivian finally spoke, voice quieter this time. It's not about the dress, Harper. You know that. Maybe it's about everything else. Maybe it's about what fits and what doesn't. I tilted my head, letting her words hang. So you tried it on because it fits better? She didn't answer. I took a step forward. You didn't borrow a dress. You rehearsed a moment. She looked down at her bare feet. Derek stared at the window. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I simply gathered the paper again and slid it back into my bag. I'm leaving now, I said. You two can figure out what size betrayal comes in. Neither of them stopped me. Outside, the wind had picked up. I crossed the street slowly, not looking back this time. I walked until the boutique lights blurred in the rearview mirror of my memory. At the corner, I stopped at the crosswalk. A couple passed me laughing, her arm looped through his. She wore a soft pink sweater, nothing special. But he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. And for the first time that day, I realized I had stopped looking at Derek like that a while ago. I didn't go straight home. I drove around the east side for almost an hour past the bookstore. Derek and I used to stop at after dinner past the parking lot where he first said he wanted to grow old with me. Past the park where we once argued about wedding venues and ended up kissing like teenagers in the rain. None of it felt mine anymore. When I finally pulled into the garage, the quiet hit harder than I expected. I dropped my keys in the dish by the door and stood there for a second, coat still on, staring into the darkened hallway like something might greet me. Nothing did. I walked into my small office and opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet I rarely touched. Inside was a dusty white box, not dramatic, not labeled. Just a box I hadn't opened since last winter. I carried it to the kitchen table, turned on the light, and sat down. The first thing I pulled out was a printed email thread with Maribel. We had gone back and forth for weeks over neckline ideas. I'd wanted something simple but sharp, elegant but not flashy. She had drawn 3 sketches. I had circled the second one with a red marker. I smoothed the page with my palm. Her handwriting was in the margins. Notes about fabric choices. A little heart next to the line where she wrote it would be perfect for you. Under that were Polaroids. Derek and me at a vineyard in Newburgh last fall, holding hands and drinking hot cider. I remember thinking in that moment that we'd finally settled into something safe, not thrilling, but steady. I kept digging. There were swatches of fabric from the boutique. A note from Vivian written in a sticky note stuck to one of the samples. You always pick the classiest stuff. If I ever get married, I want you to help me pick everything. I stared at that for a long time. Then there was the envelope, slightly crumpled, addressed to me in our father's handwriting. Inside the certificate, I had won first place in the Oregon State High School photography contest. I was 16. I remembered the morning it arrived. How proud I'd felt. How Dad had framed it and hung it in the hallway right outside the living room. And how 1 week later it was gone. Replaced by a blown-up photo of Vivian in her homecoming queen sash, smiling with her arms full of roses. No explanation. I asked once. Dad shrugged. Mom just said Vivian's picture was more representative of the family. That was the word she used. Representative. As if my achievement had been a temporary fluke and Vivian's beauty was the lasting legacy worth displaying. I was 16. I remember sitting in the garage with the radio turned up to muffle the sound of me crying. And now I was 34, staring at another version of the same swap. Only this time it wasn't a photo, it was a wedding. A future. A role I had shaped and built and lived toward. Vivian hadn't just tried on a dress. She had stepped into my space like it had always been available to her. And Derek had let her. I stood up and poured a glass of water, my hand a little steadier than I expected. Then I opened my laptop, not to post anything. Not to write an email. I opened the folder labeled Wedding Planning. Inside were budget spreadsheets, Pinterest screenshots, guest list, drafts, a letter I had started to write to Derek for the morning of the ceremony. I deleted the letter. Then I stared at the screen. For a long time, I didn't move. Until a memory surfaced. Last Thanksgiving at my parents' house, I'd shown Mom the early sketches of the engagement dress. She'd nodded politely, then turned to Vivian and said, "You should see if you can get something similar when it's your turn. You'd pull it off better." I had laughed. I always laughed when she said things like that, but I had felt it, the little nick in my ribs. Now I felt it again. Only deeper. The box on the table looked smaller now, like it had collapsed a little under the weight of everything inside. I picked up the sticky note again. Vivian's handwriting. Her compliment. And I wondered if she ever meant it. Or if she had always just been waiting for the right moment to take what she liked. My phone buzzed from the counter. I didn't check it. Not yet. I picked up the photos and slipped them back into the envelope one by one. Then I folded the receipt again and placed it neatly on top. There was something strangely peaceful in the ritual of it. Like packing away something sacred that had already been altered beyond repair. I closed the box and placed it back in the drawer. And this time I locked it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dress receipt and trying to remember when things stopped being mine. I thought of calling Derek not to fight, but to ask him why he didn't tell me. But what would he say? That it was a misunderstanding? That he didn't notice my sister wearing the exact design I had shared with him months ago? The next morning I drove across town to my mother's house. Not to accuse. Not even to confront. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. The drive to Lake Oswego felt longer than usual. Trees lined the road like guards, silent and unmoved. Her house sat neatly at the end of a cul-de-sac, the kind of house that made you take your shoes off at the door and speak in low voices even when no one was home. She opened the door in her beige robe, eyes scanning me like I was the surprise ingredient in a recipe she didn't ask for. I asked if we could talk. She didn't answer, just turned and walked into the kitchen. I followed. She poured herself a cup of coffee. No offer to me. No small talk. I cleared my throat. I saw Vivian at Everly Bridal yesterday. With Derek. She didn't flinch, just stirred her coffee. And she was wearing the dress I had custom designed. Mine. My name on the receipt. My fitting next week. Linda finally looked up. You always did have your head in the clouds, Harper. I blinked. Excuse me. She set her cup down, her voice calm like she was discussing grocery prices. Vivian has always been more grounded. You dream. She executes. There's nothing wrong with that, and honestly, it's just a dress. Just a dress. I repeated her words back to her as if saying them again would make them make sense. I had spent 3 months working with a designer. I had chosen every lace detail, the pearl placements, the asymmetrical hem. It wasn't just a dress, it was a piece of something that felt like mine in a family that always preferred copies. I walked into the living room, hoping to distract myself before saying something I'd regret. That's when I saw the family photo album laid open on the coffee table. I hadn't seen it in years. The page was turned to recent pictures. Vivian at her bridal try-on, laughing, posing with a bouquet of white peonies. And next to it a photo of Derek down on one knee. But something was off. My face wasn't there. It was the photo from my engagement night. The string lights at Cannon Beach. The rose petals. Derek kneeling. But my part of the image had been trimmed out, replaced with a close-up of Vivian holding a similar bouquet. My hands trembled. Where's the original? I asked. Linda walked over and looked down at the page as if nothing was wrong. That one looked better. Brighter. Vivian photographs well. I stood there frozen. You replaced my engagement photo with one of Vivian. She sighed. It's just a picture, Harper. Number. It's not. It's every little thing. Every birthday she got the big cake and I got the gluten-free one no one liked. Every school play where I played background trees while she got roses backstage. Every time I brought something home that mattered, you told me to let her have the spotlight because she was under pressure. Linda folded her arms. You're being dramatic. Am I? Because she didn't just wear my dress. She scheduled her try-on at my boutique. She went with my fiancé. And now she's somehow slipped into the role I was preparing for. Linda turned away, walked to the sink and rinsed her cup. Marriage is about stability. Derek and Vivian. They just make more sense. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wasn't sure what hurt more. That she said it so plainly or that she believed it. So this is about sense, not love. She looked over her shoulder. Love fades, Harper. It's better to choose someone who fits. I wanted to laugh or scream or cry. But instead I walked over to the photo album, closed it, and picked it up. I'll take this. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because even if you don't see me in this family, I still existed. I still said yes that night on the beach. And I still deserve to keep a record of it. She didn't stop me. Didn't say goodbye. I walked out, album under my arm, past the hydrangeas I had helped plant when I was 10. Past the porch where I once sat with chickenpox and she rubbed calamine lotion on my back. I drove back to my apartment and placed the album in a drawer. Not to hide it, just to remind myself it was real. I didn't cry that day. Instead, I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up an old document I hadn't touched in a year. A business plan. Something I once dreamed of before wedding planning took over my calendar. I stared at the title for a while. Woven Light Studio. The name still felt like mine. So I typed, just one line to start. And maybe, just maybe, something that started as mine could end as mine too. I still remembered the call. October last year. The middle of a rainy Tuesday evening. I had just finished grading papers when my phone lit up with Vivian's name. I hesitated. We hadn't talked in weeks, maybe months. But something about the hour, or maybe just habit, made me pick up. She was crying. Breathless. Said it was urgent. Something about a surgery. Ovarian cyst, she said. Possibly cancer. No insurance. She had just been told she needed to schedule it immediately, and she didn't know who else to call. $15,000. Not a small number. But when you hear the word cancer from your sister's mouth, you don't start negotiating terms. I didn't ask for paperwork. I didn't ask for hospital names. I just opened my banking app and sent the transfer. She thanked me over and over and promised she'd pay me back once she figured things out. I didn't hear much after that. No updates. No mention of recovery. When I asked, she brushed it off, said it was benign. Said she didn't want to worry me. I let it go. A month later, I saw the post. Vivian Bridal. A boutique launch in San Diego. The photos were glossy, the lighting, elegant. Champagne flutes. Rose gold signs. A launch collection called Vivian Grace. The comments called her a visionary, said her line redefined classic romance. And I was proud. Honestly, I was. I told myself maybe this was the fresh start she needed. Maybe the surgery was behind her, and this was how she was reclaiming her life. I didn't question where the startup funds had come from. Not then. But now, standing in my kitchen laptop, open, zooming in on a photo from her website, I felt something deep and cold press down on my chest. Third row. Second from the left. A gown titled Evelyn. But it wasn't hers. It was mine. The bodice. The lace detailing on the sleeves. The cinched waist and cascading organza layers. Every stitch mirrored the sketch I had sent Maribel last spring. Even the pearl placement on the cuffs. It wasn't inspiration. It was duplication. I clicked away. My hands were shaking too much to type. The next morning, I texted Maribel. Hey. Any chance I could drop by? Need to ask you something in person. She replied within 5 minutes. Of course. Come anytime after 2. Her studio in the Pearl District was tucked between a pottery shop and a vegan bakery, the kind of place with soft indie music and tea in mason jars. She greeted me with a hug, concern immediately creasing her brow. You okay? You sound off. I took a breath and pulled out my phone. I need you to look at something. She leaned in as I opened the website and showed her the photo. She blinked. That's your design. So I'm not imagining it. I remember the sketch you gave me. And the fabric sample. This isn't a coincidence, Harper. I sat down on the edge of her desk. She told me she needed money for a medical emergency. $15,000. That was 6 months ago. I wired it to her without question. Now she's got a boutique, a launch line, and my dress is in it. Maribel sat down beside me. I don't want to get involved in family drama, but if you're asking me as a professional, that's your work. No doubt about it. I looked at her, trying to find some reassurance in her expression. But she was serious. And honest. I still had the original email with the sketch and specs. The date was clear. Months before Vivian had even announced her boutique. I had proof. But proof didn't soothe betrayal. On the way home, I stopped at a red light and stared out the window. A couple stood at the corner laughing, holding hands, the woman clutching a garment bag. Probably a dress. Probably a bride. I had imagined that moment with Derek. I had imagined that dress being mine. And now it was a product. A profit. A stolen signature. I pulled over 2 blocks from my apartment and just sat there gripping the wheel. The memory of Vivian calling me sobbing played again and again in my mind. Her voice so desperate, so raw. Now, I wondered if she'd rehearsed it. When I got back, I dug out the folder I had almost forgotten about. Tucked in my desk drawer underneath receipts and warranty cards. I found the transfer confirmation, the old texts. Even the calendar entry where I had marked the date of her supposed surgery. It all felt absurd now, and still I wasn't angry. Not yet, just hollow. Like a well that had dried up. I opened my sketchbook, flipped past old designs, some whimsical, some unpolished. And then I saw one labeled for me. The working name I had given the dress. It wasn't about a client or a trend. It had been about hope, about starting something new. She had taken that too. I closed the book slowly and stared at my desk. Something tightened in my chest, but it wasn't despair. It was clarity. If she wanted a business built on lies, that was her choice. But the idea, the art, the origin, that had come from me. And I hadn't given her permission to keep it. This time I wouldn't confront her with tears. I wouldn't beg for acknowledgement or family understanding. I had tried that. I had stood in the boutique like a ghost. I had spoken with my mother and been erased again. Now I needed a new language. And I knew exactly where to start. I took the folder of sketches, emails, and transfer receipts and drove across town to a small office tucked between a bakery and a notary service. The door read Rowe and Associates in faded gold paint. Ethan had opened this place just after passing the bar and somehow never left. He was the only lawyer I knew who still made his own coffee and remembered how I liked mine. He looked up from his laptop when I walked in. Same crooked smile, same unruly dark hair. But his eyes, once boyish, had learned to read people. "Harper Whitman," he said, getting up and opening his arms. "I thought I'd only see you again if you got sued or married." I handed him the folder. "So maybe it's both." He gestured for me to sit. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I gave him everything. The original sketches, time-stamped PDFs, emails between me and the boutique manager confirming the custom fitting. Even the bank statement showing the $15,000 wired to Vivian months before she launched her bridal line. My voice didn't shake once. But my hands wouldn't stay still. Ethan listened. Quiet. Focused. He didn't interrupt, didn't joke. When I was done, he sat back and exhaled. "So your sister took your design, launched a boutique with your money, and now she's getting married in a dress she copied from your original sketch." "Yes. And you haven't said anything publicly, number." "Good." That surprised me. I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because you've already got the power, and if you speak now they'll turn this into a soap opera." Poor jilted sister, lashing out. "It'll become about emotions, not rights. Let them get comfortable. Let them print the invitations book, the venue shoot, the pre-wedding spread for Modern Vow magazine. The bigger the parade, the harder it falls." I stared at him. "So you're saying I wait, I'm saying you prepare." He slid his laptop toward me. "We file a copyright registration. The design sketch is enough. It proves you created it before it appeared in her line. That gives you legal standing. If she sells or promotes it, that's infringement." "And what about the money?" "Civil claim. You lent her funds under false pretenses. No contract, but the email and transfer note are good enough to start. Add to that the use of your design in commercial gain and it becomes interesting." He smiled. "A lawyer's version of mischief." I leaned forward. "How long would the registration take if we file today?" "About 2 to 4 months to process. But here's the catch. You can still sue now if needed, but having the registration first makes your case stronger. So we wait. Unless she pushes first." "She will," I said. "Then let her." He pulled out a clean form and opened a fresh tab on his laptop. "Let's get this done." It took 30 minutes to file the copyright with the USPTO. I signed electronically. Ethan uploaded my scans, labeled everything carefully. When he clicked submit, it felt like hitting a reset button on part of my life I thought I'd lost. We walked out into the parking lot together. Fall was leaning into winter and the air tasted like wood smoke and dry leaves. "You okay?" he asked. "Not really, but I'm calm." "And that's new." Ethan nodded. "Good. Calm people win lawsuits. Angry ones lose sleep." He turned toward his car, then paused. You know, Harper, you're not doing this for revenge. You're doing it for truth. There's a difference. I looked at him. It's been a while since anyone told me that. He smiled again, a little softer this time. Well, truth's kind of my thing. Back home, I made tea and sat in silence. For the first time in weeks, my thoughts didn't feel jagged. I didn't rehash every conversation. I didn't imagine a million scenarios. I simply waited. Days passed. Then 2 weeks. Then almost a month. Vivian's boutique was all over Instagram. Her line was gaining traction. Vivian Grace Bridal featured soft silhouettes, modest lace, clean lines. My lines. My proportions. Even the exact cut I had sent to Maribel the summer before. They changed the trim, renamed the model, but the bones were mine. One morning, while scrolling half distracted through my phone, I saw it. A photo posted by Bridal Edge magazine announcing Vivian's selection as one of the top 5 emerging bridal designers of the year. The feature article quoted her about her inspirations, her process, and her passion for elegance. At the end, she said something that stopped me cold. My first collection was born from a moment of crisis. I had just recovered from emergency surgery and decided to build something beautiful out of it. No mention of me. No hint of the truth. Crisis. That's what she called the fake surgery that got her $15,000. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. I closed the app and emailed Ethan. Subject: time to move. 5 minutes later, he replied. Not yet. I have a better idea. Check your mail this week. And trust me, I did. The next day, a packet arrived. Inside was a draft of a cease and desist letter, predated but not sent. Along with it, a timeline of events perfectly mapped out. Dates. Screenshots. Proof. The spine of our case. At the bottom, a sticky note in Ethan's scrawl. Wait until she announces the exclusive launch at Luxbridge. That's when we hit. Luxbridge was the biggest wedding expo in the Northeast. If Vivian was showing there, that meant deals, contracts, brand buyers. If she used my design there, it wouldn't just be infringement, it would be public. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. I wasn't sure what I saw. Not a bride, not a victim. Maybe not even a sister anymore. But definitely a woman ready to be heard, and I was almost ready to speak. Almost. The launch event was held in a glass-ceiling showroom just outside Philadelphia. Vivian had rented the entire ground floor and decorated it with swan-white drapery, floating florals, and velvet display podiums. There were macarons shaped like wedding bells and champagne flutes engraved with her initials. She wore the dress again. My dress. The neckline was slightly higher, but the silhouette was unmistakable. I hadn't planned to go. I wasn't on the guest list, obviously, but that didn't stop me from showing up. Not to make a scene. Just to witness. To know. I stayed across the street behind tinted glass in a rideshare, watching guests arrive in waves of soft pastels. Photographers buzzed around like dragonflies, and then I saw her. Vivian stepping out of a town car holding Derek's hand. He kissed her temple for the cameras. She laughed. It looked like a scene from a bridal catalog. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Ethan's number, then paused. Number not yet. I went home that night and poured myself a glass of wine. The image of her in that dress was burned into my eyelids. But so was the memory of Ethan's sticky note. Trust me. The video went up 3 days later. I found it through a friend who messaged me late at night with a simple text. Is this you? I clicked the link. It opened to TikTok. A vertical video filmed shaky and fast. The camera caught the back of a boutique. A voice whispered, "Oh my God," as it zoomed in on the checkout counter. Vivian stood there, visibly flustered, dress bag in hand. Derek was beside her, stiff. Across from them, I stood, arms folded, head slightly tilted. I didn't speak in the clip, but the tension was electric. The caption read, "Drama in the Bridal Boutique. Family Feud level 100. It had over 400,000 views. I watched it 3 times, heart pounding. The comments were on fire. Wait, is that her sister? She looks like she designed that dress. Didn't they say the sister went MIA after college? Vivian stole her wedding fund too, didn't she? And then the link drops began. Someone dug up an old Instagram post of mine from 4 years ago. It was a quiet shot of me and Derek at a food truck festival in Beacon Hill. I wore a navy scarf. He had his hand on the small of my back. The caption read, "Love isn't loud. It lasts." It matched exactly the embroidery Vivian had featured in her promotional campaign last month, stitched into the hem of the signature dress. People noticed. Comments exploded. That's her quote. Look at the date. Vivian's brand is a knockoff. I thought it was a coincidence at first, but then someone posted side-by-side images. My original sketch, her final product. Same lines. Same waist detail. Even the sleeve fold. Within a week, bridal forums started threads about it. Reddit picked it up. Then Twitter. That's when Ethan called. "You're trending," he said, voice calm. "I'm not even on Twitter." "Doesn't matter. You're a hashtag now." Harper Original. "You want the good news?" I exhaled. "Hit me." The copyright came through. "We're greenlit." I froze. "For real?" he laughed. "For real. Official registration, dated, sealed, certified. You own the sketch, you own the phrase. And yes, that includes derivative use in commercial gain." I sat down slowly. "What now?" He paused. "Now we send the letter. Not just a cease and desist. A formal notice of infringement. And if they ignore it, we file suit. She's made a sale already, right? She's made dozens. That dress is the headline of her line. Even better." He paused again. "Harper, do you want to do this? We can walk it back if you're not ready. Once we go public, it's not just legal, it's messy. And loud." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." "All right. Check your inbox in 10 minutes. I'll have the draft to you. We'll file first thing tomorrow." I opened the window and stared out into the October dusk. For the first time in months, my shoulders didn't ache with the weight of silence. I thought about how carefully I had carried that silence. How I folded it neatly, made room for it in every conversation, every holiday dinner, every phone call home. I had never once wanted to humiliate her. I just wanted to breathe again without choking on the lie. My phone buzzed. The video had crossed 1 million views. The top comment now read, "I hope the sister sues and wins," because honestly, that silence was louder than fireworks. I didn't reply. I just saved the video. That night, I pulled out the sketch again. The one I had drawn on a rainy Tuesday years ago. I had imagined a future then. Not this exact one, no. But a life that was mine. A design born out of something real. A promise to myself. Now it was a weapon. But also a shield. And I was no longer waiting. The time had come. The morning after the copyright confirmation came through, Ethan and I sat at his office in downtown Austin, hunched over our laptops, each tapping through documents and submission portals. We weren't waiting anymore. We were acting. I drafted the takedown notices under Ethan's guidance. The dresses under the Vivian Grace label were listed on at least 3 major retail platforms, including Belloweds, Marry Me Marketplace, and even Etsy. All of them offered the exact design I'd once drawn on the back of a napkin and refined over a winter break during grad school. The moment we submitted the formal copyright violation claim, we watched the countdown begin. According to the DMCA process, they had up to 72 hours to review, but Belloweds acted within 24. By the next morning, the page listing the Radiance gown by Vivian Grace returned a 404 error. On Marry Me Marketplace, the item was marked temporarily unavailable. And on Etsy, her entire shop was suspended pending verification. I was eating a late breakfast avocado toast and reheated coffee when my phone buzzed. "Vivian." I didn't pick up at first. I watched the screen light up, then go dark. It buzzed again. Voicemail. Then again. Then texts. I finally answered on the 4th try. "You're sabotaging me. Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed, skipping pleasantries. I leaned back in my chair. "I've only protected what's mine. That's not sabotage, that's just reclaiming. If you send one more letter, Harper, my entire brand will collapse. You'll be the reason dozens of brides get no dress and I get sued for breach of contract." Then maybe you shouldn't have built your brand using someone else's foundation. There was a pause. Static. Then she snapped. Don't act like you didn't give me the money willingly. 15 grand, no strings. You didn't ask for a contract number. But I also didn't ask you to lie about surgery and turn my sketch into your signature piece. That's your version of the truth. I hung up. A few hours later, I received a call from my mother. Linda had always favored calm tones and careful wording, but even she couldn't hide the unease in her voice. Can you come by this evening? She asked. We need to talk. I could guess what that meant. She wasn't calling to ask about how I was doing. She was calling to manage the fire Vivian had started and now couldn't control. I arrived at her house just after sunset. The porch lights were on and the scent of hydrangeas drifted through the air. Everything looked just as it always had. But I wasn't the same girl who used to walk through that door hoping for approval. Linda met me in the kitchen. She had already brewed chamomile tea like we were about to discuss a recipe, not a betrayal. Before you say anything, I'm not here to argue, I said, placing my bag down. She gave a small nod. Her lips were tight. She stirred her tea without sipping it. Your sister is under a lot of pressure right now. Her boutique is her life. This situation could destroy everything she's worked for. Then maybe she shouldn't have stolen what wasn't hers. Linda looked up, her eyes sharp. That design wasn't stolen. It's a dress, Harper. A pretty one, sure, but still just a dress. You gave her the money. You didn't register anything until recently. That doesn't change the truth. She lied. She used me. She's your sister. Families help each other. Families don't manipulate each other. She stood and walked toward the fridge. I watched her hands tremble slightly as she poured water into the kettle again. You've always been sensitive, Harper. You always took things personally. I looked at her. You cut me out of engagement photos. You praised Vivian for being stable while telling me to get my head out of the clouds. And now when I stand up for myself, I'm the sensitive one. I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my bag and left. She didn't follow. By the next morning, the fallout had deepened. Vivian's assistant forwarded a legal notice to Ethan. A formal cease and desist number. It was a poorly disguised threat of a countersuit claiming defamation and loss of income due to intentional familial sabotage. In other words, she wanted to paint me as a jealous sister with a vendetta. Attached was a drafted press statement. It described a deeply personal family rift and implied that I had fabricated the copyright claim out of spite because I had lost a fiancé and couldn't bear to see her sister succeed. It even referenced my old blog post with the quote, "Love isn't loud, it lasts," saying Vivian had coined it as part of her brand's emotional story. Ethan called me into his office that afternoon. His tone was calm but serious. They're laying the groundwork for a media counterattack, he said, gesturing to the printed draft. So they're making me the villain. It's a smart move if you don't have ethics. Public opinion loves a Cinderella story. If she plays the wronged entrepreneur card and cries about betrayal, some people will believe her. But we have proof. Yes. And now we use it strategically. We'll wait. Let the smoke spread a little. Then we send the wind. That evening, I sat at home alone staring at my sketchbooks. It wasn't just about a dress, it was about being erased. Again. First from my own engagement. Then from the boutique world I once dreamed of joining. And now, even in the public story, they wanted to cut out my name, my voice, my truth. But this time I had the tools. The truth. The documents. And a lawyer who knew exactly when to strike. So I didn't flinch. I waited. And while they prepared their version of the story, I worked silently on mine. Not to match their volume, but to outlast their noise. Because in a world full of loud liars, silence backed by truth could be thunder. And thunder was coming. I returned to my mother's house the next afternoon, not for reconciliation, but because something inside me needed to see it one last time with clear eyes. The place I once called home had become a museum of selective memory. I walked through the front door and was greeted not by warmth or nostalgia, but by the echo of silence. The walls were lined with photographs neatly arranged in expensive frames. Vivian in her cap and gown. Vivian at her boutique ribbon cutting. Vivian on the front page of the local bridal magazine beaming as if she had sewn the stitches herself. There were baby pictures too, toddler birthdays, middle school dance photos. Her life played out like a curated timeline of perfection. I scanned every frame and every shelf, stepping closer to make sure I wasn't just missing something. But no. Not a single picture of me. Not even one. I turned toward Linda, who stood in the doorway to the kitchen drying her hands on a dish towel. She must have seen the way my eyes darted around because she folded the towel slower than usual, her expression unreadable. "Do you still have any pictures of me?" I asked. She hesitated. The pause said more than her eventual words ever could. "You were always moving around, Harper. Always changing apartments, jobs, cities. It was hard to know what to keep. You didn't seem settled." I blinked. "So that meant I didn't exist?" "Of course not," she said quickly. But her tone held that same polite distance she always used when talking about emotions she didn't care to confront. I stepped closer to the largest frame on the living room wall. It was from 3 years ago, a boutique photo shoot for Vivian's first collection. The shot was breathtaking, professionally lit, styled to perfection. I knew because I had taken it. The colors, the angle, the emotion captured. It had taken me 2 days of testing natural lighting to get that frame right. I remembered crouching under the late afternoon sun, brushing dust off the lens, waiting for the exact moment. Vivian's laugh turned real and her eyes softened. I had handed her that image as a gift when she launched. I read the gold plaque below the photo. "Captured by Vivian." My chest tightened. I leaned in. There was a shadow in the bottom corner of the print where my watermark had been. They had cropped it out. She hadn't just erased my name, she had claimed the art itself. Vivian came down the stairs slowly, wearing the navy cardigan I'd gifted her for Christmas 2 years ago. She always said she hated cardigans, called them frumpy. But now she wore it like it had always belonged to her. She smiled, a thin, victorious kind of smile. "You shouldn't get so worked up about photos, Harper. The people in them, the people we celebrate, they're the ones we choose." I stared at her. "So I'm just someone everyone decided to leave out?" She didn't answer. Instead, she brushed invisible lint off her sleeve and walked into the kitchen. I turned back toward Linda. "That photo on the wall. I took that." Linda looked past me, lips pursed, her hand now wrapped tightly around a ceramic mug. "It's a beautiful picture," she said. "It's mine," I said again. She didn't respond, she just looked tired. I stepped out into the hallway, suddenly needing space. I paused at the end of the corridor near the coat closet. That's where the family albums used to be, stacked in clear plastic bins on the bottom shelf. I opened the door. They were still there. I knelt down and pulled the bins out one by one, flipping through covers. Volume after volume. My fingers skimmed over glossy pages filled with birthdays, Easter brunches, Sunday picnics. In every chapter, I was there less and less. By the time Vivian started high school, I was practically invisible. There was a small envelope tucked in the back of one album. I opened it. Inside were 2 pictures. One of me at age 9 holding up a spelling bee trophy, grinning with a missing front tooth. Another from college, my graduation photo. I'd sent a copy home, just one. My name was scrawled on the back in my own handwriting. I held the photo up. "Why weren't these framed?" Linda stayed silent. "It didn't fit, the rest did it, Harper, please." I stood. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply placed the photos back into the envelope, zipped up my coat, and walked toward the door. As I passed the living room again, I looked one last time at the photograph that used to have my name on it. I remembered the moment I took it. The pride. The precision. The hope that maybe, just maybe, that gift would bring us closer. But standing there now, I saw the truth. It had only given her more ground to build a kingdom on without me. Vivian walked back into the room with a glass of wine and tilted her head. "You always were the one who didn't stay long," she said lightly. "I guess some of us are just meant to be chosen." I met her gaze. "And some of us don't need to be." I left without another word. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. I welcomed it. That house might have been full of memories, but not one of them belonged to me anymore. I walked to my car slowly, the sky gray above me, and sat in the driver's seat with my hands resting on the wheel. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I reached for my phone and opened my gallery. Hundreds of photos. All mine. All untouched. I swiped through them slowly, then paused on one my favorite shot of the boutique shoot. The unedited version. My watermark still in the corner. The truth, no matter how small, still existed. And soon the world would see it. I started the car. I had somewhere else to be. I was halfway through my second coffee at a little cafe off Grand Avenue when the email arrived. It pinged softly in my inbox, tucked between an online receipt and a spam newsletter. The subject line was simple: I owe you an apology. I hesitated. The sender's name stopped me cold. Lindsay Rowe. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 years. Not since she stopped returning my calls after she took the PR job for Vivian's boutique launch. We'd been inseparable once. College roommates, creative partners, the kind of friends who could spend hours together in silence and still feel understood. And then one day she disappeared into Vivian's orbit like everyone else. I clicked open the email. Harper, I don't know where to begin, but I know I need to try. I was wrong. About a lot. I don't know when things turned so twisted, but I know Vivian used you. I know because I saw the original sketches. And I helped clean them up. I thought I was just refining a lookbook. I didn't realize what I was stepping into until it was too late. Attached is something from last month's internal team meeting. I thought you should hear it. Lindsay, there was a single audio file attached. My heart pounded as I downloaded it and pressed play. The recording crackled for a moment, then settled into the familiar hum of office chatter. Vivian's voice rang out sharp and clear. Look, just tweak the neckline, maybe add a lace cuff or a pleat. As long as it's 5% different, no one can sue us. That's the rule, we're fine. A pause. Then someone else's voice. It took me a moment to place it. Lindsay. Okay. I'll go back into Harper's original and soften the waist curve. Maybe add some ruching to the back panel. Perfect. Vivian again. Just make sure it doesn't trace back. My breath caught in my throat. Not only had Vivian admitted to using my designs, but Lindsay had helped her do it. The woman who once swore she'd never let ambition overrule integrity had knowingly modified my work. My friend. My supposed friend. I sat frozen for a moment, the cup of coffee untouched in front of me. Outside traffic rushed by like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. I forwarded the email and audio file to Ethan with a single line: just came in. Thoughts? He replied within minutes. This is what we needed. It's time to file the complaint. I stared at his words. They felt heavy with finality. When I first imagined taking action, it had been from a place of frustration and loss. Now it felt different. Strategic. I wasn't screaming into the void anymore. I had proof. I had leverage. But it didn't erase what I felt in that moment. I tapped out a reply to Lindsay. My fingers hesitated over every word. Thank you for the recording. I appreciate the honesty. I can't say more right now. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop and walked out of the cafe, the bell above the door jingling softly behind me. The sky had turned a flat shade of gray, clouds low like they were pressing against the rooftops. I pulled my jacket tighter as I made my way back to the apartment. Inside, everything looked the same, but nothing felt still. I paced for a while before calling Ethan. His voice came through steady, professional, but with the same low undercurrent of concern I had come to rely on. We'll send a cease and desist first, he said. Let them know we're aware of the infringement. Then we'll move to file with the Copyright Office and prepare for civil action. We have the time-stamped original files plus the audio. That's substantial. And the name attached to the file, I asked. Lindsay won't want to be involved. She already betrayed one person. I doubt she'll stand against Vivian. Maybe. But maybe guilt will do what integrity couldn't. I ended the call and sat in the quiet. I thought back to the night I showed Lindsay those sketches for the first time. We were on the floor of our tiny apartment in Santa Monica, surrounded by fabric swatches and Thai takeout containers. She had loved them instantly. Said they were the most refined pieces I'd ever done. She helped me name half the collection. She even promised to help pitch it to showrooms once I had prototypes. Now those sketches were hanging in Vivian's flagship window with new names and someone else's face in the press photos. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Lindsay. "Harper, I want to help fix this. I'll testify if it comes to that." I stared at her words. I didn't reply. Forgiveness wasn't a door I could open yet. Not with fresh betrayal still warm in my hands. I pulled out the sketch pad I hadn't touched in months, flipped past old designs, corners smudged with graphite, pages warped from spilled coffee and late nights. I stopped at a blank sheet and began drawing. Not a dress this time, not anything wearable. Just motion, curves, angles. A shape that moved like rage and settled like clarity. It wasn't for anyone else. It didn't have to be sold, it just had to be mine. The kind of creation you don't copyright because you carry it in your bones. My hand steadied. The knock at the door came an hour later. A soft, deliberate rhythm. I knew before I opened it who it would be. And I was ready. The envelope was cream-colored, slightly creased at the corners with my name written in my mother's careful script. It arrived in the mailbox 3 days after Ethan filed the official complaint. New return address. New postage stamp. She must have dropped it off herself. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the coffee table for hours while I worked through fabric samples, answered emails, and tried not to think about what might be inside. But by evening, curiosity won out. The letter was short. "Harper, I didn't know it would go this far. I know you've been hurt. I'm not saying you shouldn't stand up for yourself. I'm just asking, did it really have to be like this, Mom?" No signature, no warmth. Just that one tired question written in black ink that had smudged slightly at the bottom. Maybe from her own hands. Or maybe from guilt she didn't want to admit. I didn't write back. Instead, I walked over to my desk, pulled out a copy of last month's Portland Bride and Vow magazine, and flipped it open to the center spread. There I was. Not airbrushed. Not dressed in couture or bathed in golden light. Just me. Standing beside a mannequin draped in the original Harper Gray silhouette. The headline read, "The Woman Behind the Stolen Dress." Below it a smaller caption, "Designer Harper Lawson speaks out after her signature look was used without credit." The article was short but honest. A stylist named Maribel had nominated me. The same Maribel who once styled Vivian's boutique launch and had quietly stepped away after the first cease and desist letter hit. She had told the editor everything. About the sketches. The theft. The lawsuit pending. I sent the cover to my mother. No note. No explanation. Just the photo. A few days later I stood in the back of a modest event space in downtown Portland behind rows of folding chairs and a curtain of string lights. The award ceremony was small. Local designers, bridal stylists, floral artists, nothing glamorous. No red carpet. But the people in that room knew the work. They respected it. And for once I wasn't invisible. Maribel stood at the podium, a small envelope in her hands. Her smile was soft but certain. "This next award goes to someone whose name should have been known long before this season. She didn't just design a dress, she created a movement, a conversation. A line that blurred between grace and grit." She paused. Her eyes found mine across the room. "The award for original bridal vision goes to Harper Lawson." Applause filled the space, not thunderous, but sincere. I stepped forward. As Maribel handed me the plaque, she leaned in just enough for me to hear. "It's yours. Always was." I nodded. My hands didn't shake. After the ceremony, I stood near the refreshment table sipping water, trying to absorb the moment. A few people came over to congratulate me. A boutique owner asked for my card. A photographer offered to shoot my next collection for free. I smiled, grateful but careful not to let it sweep me away. I had learned not to get too comfortable with praise. Then I saw him. Ethan standing near the back just inside the doorway. He wasn't in a suit, just slacks and an open collar shirt, but he looked like he belonged there anyway. He gave me a nod, a subtle smile. I hadn't told him about the ceremony. He must have found it online. He didn't come over right away. He waited until most people had filtered out, then walked toward me, hands in his pockets. "So," he said, "I guess you're officially a name now." Guess so. How does it feel? Like I'm finally not borrowing space I already built. He nodded. We stood there in silence for a beat. Then he handed me a folder. I opened it. A partnership contract. Between me and a bridal studio based in Portland's Pearl District. Independent. Women-owned. A place that made custom gowns for women who didn't want to look like anyone else. They're offering long-term collaboration, he said. You'd have creative freedom, profit share, and use of their studio space. I looked up at him. This came through your office number. Through you. The editor from the magazine forwarded your work. They reached out directly. I turned back to the folder, reading the name of the studio embossed at the top. Magnolia Row. It felt right, quiet, grounded. Nothing flashy. Just craft. I'll think about it, I said, even though I already knew the answer. We walked outside together. The sky had turned a soft lilac, the breeze cool against the back of my neck. As we reached the sidewalk, Ethan looked over at me. You've come a long way. I thought about the girl who once stitched samples in a cramped apartment while her sister whispered about champagne launches and Paris fittings. No one really saw me back then, I said. He didn't argue. Just stood beside me while the city moved on around us. And for once, I didn't need anyone to. It was a soft afternoon in early June when I turned the sign on the door to open. The boutique was quiet, sunlight filtering through the front window and casting slow-moving shadows on the floor. The walls were bare except for one frame carefully centered and lit my original sketch of the gown that started it all. The paper was slightly yellowed now, but I had added the date at the bottom and signed it in my own handwriting as if to finally acknowledge myself. It wasn't a big space. There were no velvet sofas or champagne carts. No grand chandelier or overstocked racks. Just a row of mannequins, a wall of neatly arranged fabric rolls, and a fitting area with a full-length mirror framed in white oak. The kind of place you walked into and felt calm, not watched. It didn't look like the boutiques I had once dreamed of. It looked better. It looked like mine. The sound of a car passing on the street faded as I adjusted the hem of a silk bodice on one of the forms. My hands were steady, my back straight. No rush. No voices behind me criticizing or correcting or claiming credit. Just the soft hum of my own breathing and the quiet creak of wood underfoot. My first client was coming in that afternoon. Not for a consult. For a final fitting. Her name was Claire. She was 29, wore vintage glasses, and had a soft spot for tea-length dresses and polka dots. She'd found me through a friend of Maribel's, Creeplia's, Preeple, Port Creeple. When she came in for her first appointment, she had said almost in a whisper, I don't want to look like a princess. I want to look like myself. We worked together for weeks. No frills. Just clean lines, a silk overlay, and a whisper of lace along the neckline. She arrived 10 minutes early, dress shoes in hand, hair pinned loosely. I led her into the fitting area and helped her into the gown. As she stepped onto the small wooden platform, I crouched and adjusted the back zip, smoothing the seams as I stood. She turned to face the mirror and went still. You okay? I asked. She nodded slowly, then blinked hard. I didn't think it would feel like this, she said. Like home. I smiled. That's how you know it fits. She reached out and touched my arm. Thank you. Really. I didn't need her to explain. I had felt it too once in a version of this very room. Except that time someone else had tried to put their name on it. Now no one could. After she left, I stood in the center of the boutique staring at the spot where she had just stood. I could still see the imprint of her feet on the rug. Still feel the weight of her joy in the air. I took a deep breath and turned toward the front window. Outside, the city moved on unaware. But inside this little corner of it, something had shifted. Vivian hadn't spoken to me since the settlement. After the platform takedown and the trade press coverage, she had gone quiet. Derek had stepped down as director of merchandising, citing personal stress. My mother had not come to the boutique's opening. I had sent her the invitation anyway. Not as a gesture of peace, but as a line drawn in clarity. Ethan had stopped by on launch day with flowers. Just a simple bouquet from the corner florist. He didn't stay long, just enough to leave them on the counter and say, I knew you'd build something better. Then he smiled and walked out before I could answer. I never heard what Vivian told people. Whether she spun it as a misunderstanding or faded quietly from her own story. But it didn't matter. Her boutique's social pages had gone silent. The last post was months ago. A repost of a wedding photo with no credits. I hadn't waited for them to show up, or apologize, or change. I didn't need closure wrapped in ribbon. I had this room. One afternoon I took out my phone and opened the camera. I snapped a photo of the framed sketch on the wall. It wasn't for social media or a press release. I sent it to Ethan with one line, "She's home now." He replied with a thumbs up and nothing else. Which somehow was enough. That night I stayed late organizing fabric samples, rearranging pins, and brushing down the floor. I looked at my hands under the soft pendant lights. They were calloused again, but in the good way. The kind that comes from making things that matter. Before I turned off the lights, I stood in front of the sketch one last time. There was a moment months ago when I thought that dress had ruined me. That everything it represented was broken and stolen and too painful to carry. But now I knew better. It had always been mine. And it had never really been about the dress. It was about being seen. Not for what I gave or sacrificed or supported, but for what I built with my own hands. For what I claimed with my own name. That gown wasn't just the start of a dream. It was the start of a chapter I hadn't let myself finish. Now I was writing it again. Only this time I was walking right into it. Have you ever had something stolen from you that felt like it was yours alone? Tell me your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. And if this story spoke to you, stay a while. There's always another chapter worth listening to.